What's going on, everybody? And welcome to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. And today I have Tavar James with me. He is the global head of events and sponsorship for Riskified. Riskified is a e-commerce fraud management platform. Tavar, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Let's jump right into, global head of events, marketing and sponsorships at Riskified. Very cool role, right? You are in the thick of it. You are planning, you are strategizing, you are executing. Tell me what your biggest struggle is.
Biggest struggle, time. When you're working on a global team, and I just did an article about this in Built-in NYC, but when you are working with a global team, the time differences creep up on you, and you actually realize in many cases you lose time when you're working with a global team. And it's not a bad thing per se, but it is a struggle. It's a struggle when for example, I have a team in Tel Aviv and, their weekdays end on Thursdays, but it may be a Friday where I need to get some information over to a trade show or over to a vendor, but it's Friday and I can't reach some of my team in Tel Aviv. So we have to then wait until next week, Monday. So you kind of lose time. And that's just from a planning perspective, but then just time in general. There's just not enough time in the day. So I think time is my biggest struggle. I can't seem to overcome that one.
My director of account management, Liz, would love that answer because she's always feels like we're running on the edge. She's working with our clients, trying to get the paperwork in and everything. So I think she'd resonate with that.
Keeps it interesting for sure.
It's a deadline driven industry.
Absolutely.
It truly is. What would you say is your biggest accomplishment so far?
This may sound very full of myself, but I love my career, my path, because I've been able to tap into so many different avenues of events, from event planning to events coordinator to, special events, luxury events, to now running a global team. And not even just the different levels of events as a career or a profession, but also just the different types of events, right? I've worked on American Idol. I've worked with the Brooklyn Nets. I've worked at Madison Square Garden. Throughout my career, I've been able to touch so many different pockets of events. And I think that's a huge accomplishment. A lot of people in our industry think that, if I've started events in finance, I need to only do events in finance. Or if I started events in sports and entertainment, I only need to do events in sports and entertainment. And that may be true for some. There is still a big benefit to stepping out of those circles or those pots of industries and saying, okay, I can take these universal skills in events and apply them to many different industries and make myself that much more well-rounded. And I'm very happy that I've been given the privilege to do that. So that's my biggest accomplishment. I just love my career path.
I like that a lot. I think it's a very well-rounded answer in the sense of it's not one thing in general. The fact that you have touched so many different things, I agree with. I find so many people that are in a sector of events, but it's there's so many sectors, there's so many industries, there's so many different things, and they do all work hand in hand to a degree. One experience makes your next experience better, right? So good for you. If you kind of had to sum up quickly, what's a philosophy of yours for successful event marketing?
Successful event marketing, I would say the only thing constant in the world is change. You have to be adaptable to change. And when I say just across the board, COVID came, trade shows and conferences were impacted significantly, right? And so it's how do you pivot your strategy? How do you pivot the way that you approach trade shows when this conference that you typically invested in would bring together 20,000 people? This year, it's only bringing together 2,000 people. How do you change your strategy? How do you change your approach? And how do you not let that sway you too far to a point where you're losing out on all the benefits that organization or that trade show or event may still bring to your organization? So I think you have to be adaptable to change in order to be truly successful in event marketing, especially event marketing, not just events or event planning, but event marketing, because marketing is tied to the market. The market changes, people's attitudes, people's personas, people's behaviors change. So you have to be able to adapt to that, stay fresh, stay up to speed on what's going on, and be ready for volatility and make sure that you are in a position where you can continue to show value to your key stakeholders. So that way, in the midst of volatility, you're not too impacted.
Really true event marketers, such as yourself, you're also leaders. You lead a lot of different people, a lot of teams, a lot of suppliers. There's a lot of moving pieces. So I think your answer resonates for me in terms of leadership as well. right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Change, adaptability, getting your
Absolutely.
team comfortable with change is a big one there. What keeps you up at night?
My team, and not in a bad, not in a bad way, in the
Yeah,
best way,
I know.
because
Yeah.
I am such an advocate for, and this goes back to my hospitality experience. So because I started in hospitality with Marriott hotels and that whole umbrella of hotels, I have it embedded in me, the Bill Marriott philosophy, which is take care of your employees will take care of your guests, and your guests will keep coming back. And so employee centric mentality has always been my North Star. And so what keeps me up at night is, am I doing the best for my team? Is my team happy? How can I make them happier? Am I showing up the way that I need to show up as a leader? Am I contributing to their personal and professional development? And so it doesn't keep me up in a sense of I'm not doing a good job at that, or I am doing a good job at that. It just keeps me up in a sense of, Tavar, just make sure you're on it as a leader. Just make sure you're showing up and you're present for your team, and you're always doing the best you can for your team. So that keeps me up at night.
That's great. It's a very emotionally
I am.
intelligent answer.
I'm an emotional brat. I hate to say it because I'm 6'2",
Yeah.
200 pounds, and I am a big teddy bear.
So tell me, I want to talk a little bit about kind of how you've gotten into this role, right? You do have a very cool background. You have a very unique background in terms of the steps in which you took. I also find it interesting, and I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice not to talk about it, is essentially like I've been in this industry, trade shows, events since 2011, right? So 12 years now. Yep. I've worked with a lot of people in the roles that you're in. That's our customer base. I mean, you're young, you're African-American, right? You are in a space where not a lot of people like yourself doing this job. Yep. There's just not. Absolutely. And which is an interesting and probably a whole nother conversation on its own about diversity in our space. But for you, right? Tell us a little bit about like how you got here. Like, what were the steps you took? You have a cool story.
Yeah. I always knew the chips I had against me, just as you said, Black, gay. I knew that I just didn't necessarily have the typical profile of someone that would get in events, and a guy, right? Let's be honest. The events industry is still largely dominated by women. So I knew the chips I had against me. And so when I started in the hospitality industry and I recognized that I'm good at this, right? I knew, okay, you're either going to go full steam ahead in this and knock it out the park, or you're just not going to do it at all. And the full steam ahead, knock it out the park was the only option I had. And so, I started out as a front desk night auditor at a Courtyard hotel here in South Florida. And the general manager and the director saw something in me. And they were like, hey, we love how you work with the guests at the front desk. We want to move you upstairs to be our sales and marketing coordinator. And from there, once I got into that position and I realized, wait, I actually really love hotels and I love doing this. I started to tap into my network. I started to get introduced to different people. I recognized how you need to move in hospitality, right? Like there's this rule in hospitality. You don't stay at a hotel more than 1 or 2 years and then you move on. I adapted to that mentality very quickly. I climbed the ranks. I shook the right hands. But I did all of that not because I'm like a brown noser or because I want to know the world. I'm actually an introvert. A lot of people don't know this, but I'm an introvert, a hardcore introvert. But I did all of that because I knew I had the chips against me. And I knew if I really wanted to be successful, I had to work a little bit harder. So to answer your question, I think what I would say to anyone watching this is not only know your strengths, but know what you're up against. Because when you know what you're up against, that's how you can really flex your strengths. It's one thing to walk down the sidewalk and say, I'm the best, most fashionable person in the world. But why are you the best, most fashionable person in the world? Is it because you know fashion? Okay, great. A lot of people know fashion. Yeah. A lot of people know events, right? It's not that. It's because I'm good at this as me, as a minority, as a male, as someone who typically on paper probably shouldn't have been successful. That's what makes me so amazing at it, is because of my story. And so I think you have to know how to flex those muscles when you know what you're up against. And that I keep in the back of my head every day. No matter how big I get in my career, it doesn't matter if I become a managing director of, TNT networks or something. It doesn't matter. Yeah. I'm always going to have it in the back of my head that I still got a lot of work to do. And that keeps me going.
Do you think some people, like you said, whether like in an industry that is typically not too diverse, right? Yeah. So whether you're Black, whether you're gay, whether you're a woman, whether you're whichever part of the diversity inclusion that, do you think people struggle to push through something that they may like or that they're involved in because they don't see themselves doing it, or they don't see someone who looks like them doing it, essentially. Like they just need maybe a little bit of, what's the term I would use? I guess like courage, like you had to kind of say, hey, like I'm good at this and I'm going to push into this and I'm going to ask the questions and I'm going to push a little bit. And I know I have things up against me. Do you feel people hold themselves back a little bit like that? Like they don't?
Yeah, that's the other version of me. Like you have the me that is like, I see an opportunity and I see the person I want to see in that space. I'm going for it. And then you have the other type of person. I don't see the type of person. I don't see me in that space. I'm afraid to go into it. And so, I think representation matters. And that's why, because people need to see that you can do it. People need to see that I can do what he's doing or she's doing. And not to say you want to copy anyone, but you just need that little amber of hope to say, okay, wait, I can do that. When I joined the financial services space and joined Equitable, at that time it was Access Equitable, the financial services is still a predominantly white male industry, right? And so going into that space, I knew what I was up against. I knew that, it wasn't a space where a lot of me was present, but it motivated me to want to enter that space because I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see. And so there's two people in this world. There's people like that who want to see the change. And so they go be part of the change. And then there's people that are a little bit more nervous about being part of the change. And they wait until that change is a little bit more prominent. And then they go for it. Neither one is right or wrong, but there are two different spectrums of how people look at that kind of thing, in my opinion.
That's cool. I like that. Tell us a little bit step by step, maybe just, you don't have to go overly detailed, but talk about your roles over time.
Oh, my roles over time. I started out as a coordinator, went from a coordinator to a manager. That moved me to New York. Went from a manager to a regional manager for 2 different regions, Southeast regions, and then back in the Northeast. Went from a regional manager to director at Ritz-Carlton. Went from director to senior director, head of. Went from senior director, head of, to global head of.
Give us a glimpse a little bit in those roles. What were some facets that you really liked? What were some of the most memorable times?
Hospitality industry was so awesome because I worked with so many different people, so many different types of groups, so many different personalities on a day-to-day. When you're working for a specific organization, you come to know your C-suite, your management team, your colleagues, that's your company. So you see them day in and day out. The hospitality industry, one week I'm working for American Idol, next week I'm working for A10, next week I'm working for a bat mitzvah, next weekend I'm working for a wedding, right? It's you meet so many different types of people, personalities. Yeah. It makes it for a fun ride for sure. So that is the most memorable for me in hospitality. Now on the corporate side, what I love is that you are forced to be a true advocate for your company, right? So like you have to move with how your company moves. Yeah. And you always have to be at the forefront of what your company is trying to position themselves as. Like you are a true, you're a true advocate for your company. Whereas in hospitality, you can kind of hide behind that. If you don't like this group or you don't like what they stand for, you don't like who they are, they're leaving in 2 days. Who cares? Just put on a good face and do it. But when you're working for an actual company where you are part of that company, you have to kind of shift your mindset a little bit and be an extension of the company. So I think that's the interesting difference between the two.
Probably then really matters who you're working for, with what team you're a part of, the company.
Absolutely.
I have this. So as I've been doing this podcast and just meeting more people, and then our clients, as our business has grown, all different people we talk to, I find I am more stunned now, 12 years into this, that more companies like Riskified, like others that are valuing face-to-face events, spending say $250,000 to $5 million or even beyond a year on events and trade shows, that so many of them do not have an experienced event marketer running the show. It's an absolute shocker to me, right? Mm-hmm. Because like when you and I have a conversation about trade shows or events or something, we are speaking the same language. Yep. Very easy conversation. You're talking strategy, you're talking execution, you're talking, the customer, all that stuff. You're talking about the positioning of Riskified, the brand, and how it aligns with you and what you're doing. I'm blown away by how many companies are dropping $500,000 a year at trade shows, but they don't have an event marketer running the show. Do you have any insight as to maybe why that is?
Yeah, I tell you exactly why. That's because people still don't respect what events people do. So a lot of organizations, they think that, I have so-and-so over here who's been working in product for 15 years and we need to do events. We need to do more events. Let's just have so-and-so who's been doing product. They know the company. Let's just have them do it. But what people don't realize is that it's not just knowing your company, it's knowing events. Like We are such an undervalued profession. I hate to say that. And for those companies out there like Riskified who values events and values true events professionals, kudos, hats off to you. Don't ever lose that. But there are still a lot of companies out there that look at events as just PowerPoints and pens. That's it, or party throwers, and not necessarily as strategic, thoughtful people who bring more to the table than just save the dates, reservations, what kind of food and beverage do you want to have. So I think that's the reason why, is that people still don't understand what events professionals do. We've come a long way just in the past 5 years. We've come so long. I'm seeing so many jobs nowadays around heads of events, director of events, people who really are like, okay, no, we need someone who knows how to do this, which is great. But you still have a lot of those legacy companies that are like, do we really need to hire someone for that? Just have this admin do it, or just have that admin do it. So that's why.
It's a mix of an associate, a marketing person, a salesperson. So they have a whole nother job that they have to do daily. And now they throw this on them. I honestly, as I've grown and built my company to where we are now, I've had times where I am like, I want to, as a CEO, call another CEO and be like, hey, I'm fascinated. The person that's spending $500,000 of your money on 3 trade shows, not your money, but the company's money, right? Like, why are they not trained? Why are you not getting them support? Why have you thrown this person in the fire? Why do you not have an event marketer that you've prioritized to bring in to say, hey, go get us results?
And no, I was going to say, and not to cut you off, but imagine, the question I throw back to people that have that mindset is, imagine how much more of a return you would see on your investment if you invested in a true events professional. So I say this to anyone who's watching this or listening to this right now. Events is not an off the side of your desk job. Stop thinking it is. It's not. If you really want to see a return on your investment as an event marketing, from event marketing perspective, whatever the case may be, tap into getting a true events professional. I can guarantee you're going to see the return. Guarantee it.
It's a channel. It truly is. It's a marketing and sales channel without question. Absolutely. And when it's done right, and you are in a space, there's just some industries that just, face-to-face events are just not a good space for them. There are some, it's just, it's a little colder. It's not great, but then there are some that it's excellent for. And these people don't. That was a little off topic, but I was curious your opinion.
I was going to say, we can go to, you can bring me back to part 2, that one, because that I have a whole opinion about.
It's something I've been thinking and writing about and asking questions. And I'm overly curious. I think my industry, our side of things, the trade show, the event companies, the designers, the producers have gotten really stale with just accepting the fact that the person that we're going to work with on the side, that we're just going to kind of hold their hand and get them across the finish line. And it's typically because they don't know better. It's not really their fault. They just don't know. Whereas when somebody's working with you, or maybe one of your senior people who do know, we're not holding their hand. We're working together, and we're bringing value. And it's totally, it's a different, it took me years for my eyes to open up to that. Cause I was like, oh, we just sold this person this exhibit and this service, and like, man, we're like holding their hand, and they're confused at times. And then, we're working with these people, and man, we're just crushing it with them. We're having these post show call. It's a different world. It's unbelievable. You know what I'd love to talk about is some strategy stuff, right? With what you all are doing. Like, you have a very robust program events wise for Riskified. You guys are very invested in face-to-face events. So I'd love to know, why are you so invested in face-to-face events and live events? What about them?
The reason why is because we are very specific in the people and the companies that we go for. And so we understand the value in face-to-face interactions. We do. And one of the great things about Riskified is that's from the top down, from the CEO down. Every single person within this company understands the value of face-to-face engagement. And it's not to say that we don't see the value in like virtual and webinars and things of that sort, because we invest in that as well. But we know that if we really want to make an impact and we really want to have those solid conversations, we got to get in front of people. And so our approach is to not just throw our teams any and everywhere, but to really be extremely strategic and specific in where we put boots on the ground. That way, although we're investing all of these dollars, we're maximizing every single dollar. And I'm very happy to say that our go-to-market team is very, very, very aware of where their people are and where they need to be, which helps my team significantly in building out these experiences and being more strategic. We're not just throwing things on the wall and seeing what sticks. We're going into the year already knowing, okay, we want to show up here, 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 here. We want to have this many regional events. We want to have this many webinars. We have, and we deviate from that a little bit here or there because strategy changes. But for the most part, we are so tied in to where we need to be and why that it allows us to be so thoughtful in our planning. And that's proven to be very, 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 very good as far as an investment perspective. And it instills confidence in our leadership team as well. When you can advocate for all the money you're spending on trade shows, conferences, events, and you can put a plan in front of your senior leadership team. Like, yes, the ROI is one thing. We want to talk about the postmortem and how much return and all that kind of stuff. But when you can go into your senior leadership team with a plan to say, okay, you're giving me this much money. I'm showing up at this many trade shows, this many regional events, these many webinars. It really instills a confidence in how they're spending that money. And I think that's why Riskified gets so much support, is because we're really thoughtful and intentional.
I think it's cool you have the top-down support, right?
Absolutely.
And then, of course, when you bring in the right people to run departments and channels, good stuff happens.
Yeah.
Typically, right?
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about that you touched on was the word thoughtful. I think you said thoughtful strategy, right? So you're going in, you know where you're going, you know why you're going there. Yep. I think when you do that, you can be very intentional about everything, from the way things are designed to your touch points, to your marketing, to your conversation, the language at the events, the show floor, the follow-up, the communication, the and everything, which inevitably I think is what achieves results on the backside of events, right? Tell me a little bit about your process at Riskified strategically when you're rolling into trade shows and events.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is I stay very close to my go-to-market leadership team. And so we have constant conversations around what's right in front of us, what do we need to move the needle, and how can events be used as a channel, to your point earlier, to move that needle. And so when we look at these different conferences and we get the attendees list, we spend time scrubbing those lists, looking at every single person or every single persona that may be on that list to understand how it may apply. And then from there, we decide who within our team is the best person to be boots on the ground, right? So it's not just a matter of, we have, 5 people on our BD team that live in Vegas. So let's send those 5 people to that conference in Vegas. It's that's not the people that need to be there. The people that need to be there are X, Y, Z. So we look at the full picture, to your point as well. Like, what is the surround sound? What we are building around these conferences? What kind of networking events do we want to do? We look at the experience first, and then based off of the experience and who we think will be there, that's when we apply support, who from BD, who from AE, and so on and so forth. But I think the biggest part to all of that is the relationship that I have with our go-to-market leadership team, and making sure that they understand that my team is an extension of them. And so we are here to just be a channel for them to drive results. And that's been very, very successful for us.
So 2 things, the relationship between sales and marketing. When it comes to events, to me, is very, very important. I feel like the best event marketing companies, event marketing teams, they are involving sales. They are getting them on board. They are taking them through what that process looks like. Tell me a little bit about how your events work with sales and marketing, kind of that, the combination of like the conversations with customers, the post show, what it looks like, the leads, the, information back and forth, and how sales and marketing work together.
Yeah, we try to build full out campaigns around every trade show, right? So it's not just an event, it's a trade show. We treat it like a campaign. So what is the build up into the campaign? How do we promote our activity that we're doing at that campaign? How do we get people to register for our networking events? All of that stuff leading up to the actual campaign / trade show. And then what the experience is, boots on the ground. Like, what does our booth look like? What kind of activity are we doing at the booth? And then afterwards, how are we following up with all these people that we interact with? So, short answer, because I can talk about that for hours, but short answer, I think, is we don't look at our events or our trade shows as just events. We look at them as a full out campaign. And that campaign, like the event is 1 or 2 days, but the campaign is probably like a good 3 months. So that's been very, very, very successful for us as well. And helpful for us is to kind of shape our thinking to think more campaign driven. And what is the life of the event before and after? That works really, really well. And our sales teams, they like that approach because they're tapped into so many different points in the journey. And that gives them a little bit more opportunity to interact with and have conversations with some of their contacts. Like it's not just I'll be at this event, see you in 2 months. It's a buildup, and they appreciate that. They appreciate that partnership with marketing to help them with that buildup.
Selfishly, I loved what you just said because I have been just like pumping content out there with both terms, channel and campaign, like just trying to press the idea that like, if you are not treating your trade shows and events like a channel, and if you are not operating them and executing them like a campaign, like you are completely missing, in my opinion, just completely missing, because the best are doing it without question.
What's your message aside from your company's mission or with their typical message? What is the message for that conference, that trade show? Right? Again, it's its own campaign. You got to look at it that way. And so that's the value that teams see in event marketing. When you're looking at events as not just, again, logistics, people getting flights, hotel rooms, like all that stuff is great. But when your sales team can see your events team truly operating as marketing professionals, and you go to them and you say, yeah, we're going to Shop Talk, but this is our message at Shop Talk this year. But wait a minute, our message at MRC was so-and-so. Yeah, our message at MRC was so-and-so because so-and-so is going to be there. At Shop Talk, these people are going to be there. So our message at Shop Talk is XYZ. They love that. They eat that stuff up.
Yeah. Well, they eat it up because it's good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it produces results. I spoke with, her name is Erin McElroy. You should connect with her if you're not. She's on LinkedIn. She works for IBM. She has a super cool background. She has like a product background, but then turned into events. She has a role very similar to yours with IBM. And we talked about this exactly. Channel, campaign, setting this up. And she described it so similar to you, but the word that she used to me, she said story and narrative. She said, we go into every show with a story and a narrative. And she said, the other way, we're talking messaging and positioning. Absolutely. How do we want to position this product and us to our audience at this show? And it's like, to me, fascinates me how many people are not thinking this way, yet how many people are and doing such a good job.
And it's such basic. I don't want to say basics. I don't want to dummy it down, but in many ways it is basic. Like, yeah, we are going to change the video assets on our booth between conferences. Yeah, we are going to change some of the logos on our booth between conferences because it's a different audience. And when you do have a little bit of overlap between two conferences, and there was one person at one conference and now they're at another conference, and they see the changes that you've made to your experience between the two conferences, it's impressive because it shows that you were thoughtful and intentional in what you're doing. And it's not just a matter of, okay, pack this bad boy up and send it on to the next conference. Like, no, there's intention behind everything that we do.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Pack this bad boy up and send it to the next one.
And it could just be resources. Some companies are cutting back, and you don't have the resources and you don't have the budget to change between every conference. But man, if you can, you've got to. You definitely have to.
Yeah, I agree. You know what it makes me think of? How we're talking about like story, narrative, messaging, positioning, right? What it makes me think of is kind of going back to the conversation we had earlier, which is about how leadership at some places just doesn't respect what event marketers do. And fully. And I think people like agonize over ads, website, like every other form of marketing. They could be doing a 1-page ad that costs them $3,000 in some publication. And they will sit in a room and fight about what the messaging says. Yet they're spending $500,000 on a trade show booth or multiple trade show booths. And they're not even having a conversation about the messaging.
Yeah, they're just like slap the logo, put on our sizzle reel, and keep it moving. Like, yeah, no, you gotta be more intentional, more thoughtful. And another good thing is that when you have the right marketing team, your programs team, your design team, your content team, when you have the right marketing team that supports that, it makes it that much easier.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about sort of, obviously Riskified has business initiatives. They have goals. They have things that they're trying to accomplish either quarterly, yearly inside of the organization, right? How are those tied into what you and your team are doing and executing on a yearly basis?
It's just world domination, dude. I'm kidding. It's just very easy world domination. No, I'm kidding.
Just world domination.
Yeah, our go-to-market focuses, our go-to-market strategy is very, I don't want to say it's only numbers driven, but it is very numbers driven. So it's very easy to tie into how that trickles down into marketing and how marketing can influence some of those numbers, some of those deals. It's very easy to kind of articulate that or illustrate that. I think what makes it easy is the fact that our sales teams really rely on events. And so
Mm,
because they really rely on events, it's very easy for us to showcase the return because they speak up for us, right? Sometimes you have events teams are having to sit in front of or events leaders have to sit in front of their leadership team and explain why you invested $500,000 into this conference or explain why you invested a few $1,000s into this networking event. We don't really have to do much of that here at Riskified because our sales team does it for us. They'll go right in front
yeah.
of our president or right in front of our CEO or right in front of their VP of sales and say, yeah, I went to this conference and I had this many meetings and I met with this person and this logo and that logo, and this is the conversations we had. And boom, there's a
Mhm.
return. So it's not hard for us to understand how the overall goals and objectives of the company cascade down to us. It's kind of obvious. And I'm lucky. I'm lucky to be able to say that. Not many
Yeah.
companies can say that, but it is kind of obvious how we impact the overall organization.
What kind of advice would you give to somebody? Say they're a marketer, they're in a brand, a company that kind of throws them in the fire to say, hey, you have, 2 trade shows a year that we do, an event or two, and we want you to take it over, right? What kind of
Mhm.
advice would you give them if they're thinking about trying to push the boundaries, thinking of saying like, hey, just showing up every year and getting the booth there or getting the event, it's just not enough. That's what this company's done.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you offer them to begin pushing the boundaries and begin trying to put a real event marketing program in place?
You got to come up with the data. Most
Mhm.
leaders are very
Okay.
data driven people. And so I think, aside from building trust and building rapport and getting them to actually listen to you, right, respectfully, I think you have to come with examples. You've got to come with data and you've got to come with companies similar or better than you that are doing it and doing it
Mm,
well. So when you go in front of your C-suite or you go in front of your executive leadership team and you have this idea of this awesome campaign or you have this idea of this awesome experiential value that you want to add to the booth, you need to show them, well, so and so did it, and this is the impact it had. In full transparency, and I don't know, someone might slap my wrist for even saying this, but I recently did that. There
mhm.
was a company that I saw at an event that did something extremely well, and I went back to our
Yeah.
marketing team and I shared it instantly. I went on Slack and I shared it immediately. And I was like, this is awesome. This is why we need to be doing things like this. This is
Yeah.
why we invest in
Oh, yeah.
more value in XYZ. I'm not going to get too much into detail, but you got to do that. You got to show examples. You got to show, if you want to be the best, you got to look at the best. And so I think that's the best way to do it. You can't just talk about it. You got to show it.
Yeah. I like that advice because you've obviously sat in those shoes. You are in those shoes. You're doing things like that. I've constantly given the advice of like, I think young marketers in particular are people that are put in a position where they don't have 10, 15 years of experience of doing something and they're proven and they're just given something is, I always say, you tell me if I'm wrong on this, but it's like ask questions, involve yourself. Don't just carry out the task
Yep.
and ask questions. Why are we there? What have we done in the past? Do we get results from this show? Like you got to get curious and you
Mhm.
have to think like a marketer because it's events, but it's event marketing.
Yeah, I think anyone I would definitely stress that to any young professionals coming up who are joining an organization, do your roadshow throughout the organization and ask questions,
Yeah.
ask qualifying questions, tap into the history, tap into where they want to go, tap into how they're doing it now. But ask, 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 ask. It's the best thing that I can recommend. And speak up too. If you have suggestions, speak up.
Yeah.
And this is what I
Yeah.
always say about speaking up is like, even if you're dead wrong, I can guarantee you the question that you asked or the comment that you made has sparked some level of some idea in someone's head.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
no matter, you could be dead wrong, but I guarantee
Mhm.
you it's going to get someone to think. And if you can get one person in the room to think, mission accomplished. So you got to speak up and you got to ask questions.
What's funny about you saying that is I also feel like being curious is kind of a double-edged sword at big companies sometimes
Mhm.
where I think it could be path to like getting promotions and people recognizing you because people are like, man, they're asking like she's asking some great questions. There's also people that want to suppress it and push it down and say, hey, I don't, do your job. I don't want to hear this. But those
Right,
people suck, right?
right,
Like those people
right,
suck.
right.
But the good leaders are going to see somebody asking smart questions and be like, okay, they may not know what they're doing, but they know what they're doing.
Yeah,
They're curious. They're asking. They want things to be better. They want to make sure that it's result driven. They're not just carrying out tasks.
I would be afraid to work for someone who didn't ask questions, and I would be afraid to
Yeah.
have someone work for me who did not ask questions.
Who
I've been
didn't?
very lucky in my career where every leader, knock on wood, but every leader that I've had has been open to me asking questions, and they've allowed me to
Yeah.
ask questions. again, I'm one of the lucky few, but every single leader I've had, and when I would ask questions, they would give me answers and they would bounce it back on me and they would want to hear what I have to say. Like I've never been in a role where I've had a leader who's just been like, hush, do the job. I've always been in a role where people hire me because they want to hear what I have to say.
Of
And
course.
that's the kind of organization you want to be part of.
You know, it's funny. I've done a lot of hiring over the last, however long, but like one thing I've learned is that when I'm hiring people now is I always say, I'm going to know in the first 90 days,
Absolutely.
120 days, if you're not asking me questions,
Yep.
I'm going to know you're not a good fit because
Yep.
you're not curious. You're not going to push the status quo. You're not going to you're not going to challenge me or us or others. And the more questions you ask, the better you're going to get at something. I mean, it's a guarantee.
Absolutely. And that goes both ways as well. If you're in a position where you are asking the questions and you're not getting the response or the space to ask those questions, then you should also be saying to yourself, I'm in the wrong place.
That's trouble. Yeah, without question. I always tell people I know who ask, when people ask me about like jobs and things like that, I always say, hey, like you got to vet them as much as they're going to vet you.
Absolutely.
Don't just be, without giving away any secret sauce, because we don't want to do that. But where are you? Yeah, where are you in Riskified? Where do you feel like you're finding the most success at your trade shows and your events? Is it something specific? Is it a style of engagement? Is it a way that you're creating experience? Is there something in particular you feel like you do really well?
I won't give away like too much, but here's what I will say. At Riskified, quality definitely trumps quantity. Take that as you want, but that is our sweet sauce. Quality over quantity. Again, we are so into being intentional, thoughtful, having our goals when we go to these conferences, knowing who we need to get in front of, knowing how we want to get in front of them. Definitely quality over quantity. I'll just say this. There's one trade show that I recognized when I started that we are over investing in and we don't need to. Because regardless of whether we invest X or Y, we're still getting in front of the right people. We're still meeting with the right amount of people. We're still having those conversations. And so we're going to reevaluate our investment moving forward, but quality over quantity.
You know what's cool about what you just said? The quality over quantity is good. But when you said that you're over investing in a trade show, so what I would ask anybody listening to this, or if this ends up as a clip is, and you're watching, is, are you doing the work as an event marketer at a company to be able to even go to leadership and say, hey, we're over investing? Oh, yeah. I mean, think about that. What we were just talking about with promotions and people recognizing talent. If you want to be that person inside of a big company or a brand, that's an absolute no-brainer. If you're doing the work like you're doing, you can go to someone and say, hey, by the way, we're over investing here. I need to make a few changes. I'm going to check something out, but I want you to be aware we may make a big change here. Absolutely. And someone's going to be like, oh, wow. Like, that's great. I mean, we didn't know.
Because it's not always, I need more. Sometimes it's, hey guys, I need a little less. Yeah. And they respect your finance team, man. You go to them and you tell them, guys, we don't need as much of an investment. And it's not to say you want to give them back the money, but it just
they think you're joking.
But it goes to show them that, wait a minute, he's thinking strategically. He's not thinking just give me money. He's thinking, give me money, but I want to place it in the right buckets. And so after every conference, we have a debrief with our attendees and our key stakeholders for that different conference, trade show, whatever. And these are the tough questions we ask. Did we need X? Need Y? How was X? How was Y? We ask those questions, we reevaluate, and we make changes. You have to.
Yeah. It's really good. You had a LinkedIn post that I saw that I was,
which one?
I liked. I thought it was
I have many.
That's, hey, I make them too. You got to get your thoughts out there somehow, right?
Yeah.
You wrote one. It was kind of catered towards, I think, event people. And you had said it is like 4 things that you think that, you think about events.
Yeah.
4 things on a Friday. And I want to run through them. And there's one that really sparked my interest. Not that the other 3 were not good, but one was be still. 2 was we are unique, which I can tell you that event people are unique. It is a unique industry. We're built differently. There's something about event people. 3 is be intentional, which I absolutely love. If you ever read my LinkedIn stuff, like intentional is like the word I use over and over. I actually thought, I wasn't sure if intentionality was a word for like 90 days. I used it all the time. It is.
Yeah, it is definitely.
The 4th was interesting. You said the tides are changing, talking about events. And I have my opinion on that, but I'll save it. I want to know exactly what you mean, what you're talking about, and kind of what your thoughts are there.
The tides are changing as an industry in that, from a personnel perspective, the vets who have been in the industry forever are getting ready to retire. They're getting ready to move on. They're getting ready to do private work, whatever the case may be. The newer people are coming on board, wanting mentorship. They're wanting guidance. They're, trying to figure out where they fit in our industry. And then you have the people in the middle, like myself, who are observing and having to ask themselves hard questions. And I know that's exactly what I wrote, but it's true. You're asking yourself all these questions about, where am I? What do I want to do next? And where do I fit in the future of events, right? When you think of all the different conversations happening around AI and around, acquisitions and mergers and, contractors are becoming a big thing where organizations are finding that they can hire contractors instead of hiring actual internal events teams. Where do I fit into this mix? Or do I even want to be in this mix anymore? So that's what I mean by the tides are changing. It's just, the events industry has grown so much in the past few years that I think a lot of people are kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, where am I in this craziness? And again, you have the retirees or the older people that are like, I'm done, I'm good, I don't want to be in this craziness. You have the young people who it may excite them or scare them. And then you have the people in the middle like me who are like, I've been in this too long to leave, but I also don't know if I like where it's going. I need to start asking myself some hard questions.
Yeah, there's a cool point you made about the tides are changing. I feel like I've been talking about this a little bit. I just think events and trade shows and all this has changed since they rebooted. And they've changed in a lot of ways. Like, I think the value that's at in-person events has changed. Virtual has challenged certain areas. It's not going anywhere. It's going to kind of go on its own path and do its own thing and provide its own value. I know from my industry, I felt like a lot of the people that had been in the industry for a long time, once the arduous, it's close to 2 years, right, or so was over with, they just wanted things to go back to the way that they were. And I'm like, they're not going back to the way they were.
Ever.
It is going to be different. What is the shift? What is the change? I think one of the big ones I've noticed is that for the next 10 years, the core group of buyers and audience will be millennials and Gen Z for trade shows, for events. They already are. What you see, figure millennials are, what's the top age of a millennial? I mean, I'm 37. I'm a millennial, I think. I'm pretty sure I am.
It's up to 40, 38, 39.
Yeah. So it's already there, right? So for the next 10 years, 15 years or so, those are going to be the buyers. Those buyers buy differently than the previous generations. They buy way differently. So that means the content has to be different. The experiences have to be different. The manner in which, how you sell them, how you talk to them, it's a different world. And if you are a brand and you're exhibiting and doing events, like you gotta be thinking that way, I think. And I go on it for days, but
no, and I agree. And that's what I mean by you have people in the middle who are asking themselves, do I want to do that? There's such a generational difference in the generations these days, just because of technology and just the way things have developed so rapidly that you got to ask yourself, do I want to be part of that? And some people are equipped for it and ready for the challenge. And I'm one of them. I think I am ready for that challenge. And there's some people who are like, events was once something I loved. Post-pandemic, not so much. I'm out of here. And that's the tides are changing. Yeah.
I think to what you said is true, like both personally and then also as an organization. Like, I feel like people have to decide if they're going to be in events, what do they want to be? Where are they going to put their flag? Right. What are they going to do? Like, for you personally, you have to decide. Riskified has to start to decide.
Yep.
Right. Like my company, we're talking about it all the time. We're deciding like, where are we going to plant our flag? Who are the people we're going to work with? What do we want them to think we're all about? Part of the reason we started this podcast is exactly that. We want people to know what we are about and what we think and what we stand for, because events will change. They are changing. And I think all for the better. And
as I said at the top of this, the only thing constant in this world is change. It really is. You have to be able to adapt. And that's one of the things that makes events people so unique, is that we are able to adapt and we are able to shift and go with the Orinoco flow, as I like to say. But there's some people that just don't want to do that, and that's okay. So
we'll leave them behind.
Show goes on, right?
Show goes on. You had another thing on LinkedIn that I was curious, and I want to ask you just to expand on it for people, because I think it's important for anybody listening who's doing something similar to you or vice versa, but it said that you love to bring people together in creative and strategic ways to engage and amplify a brand's message, whatever that message may be. Right. So just talk to that a little bit. What about it do you love? What do you mean by creative and strategic ways to engage and amplify?
Yeah, like I love when someone sits in front of me, like a chairman or a senior level exec, or even a fellow marketing professional, and says to me, "This is my message. This is what I want to get across. I need help doing it in an engaging, experiential, sometimes fun way.
Yes.
Help me do that." That gets my juices flowing. When I walk into a space and it's nothing, my teams that I've worked with in the past will tell you this. I will stand in that space, close my eyes, and just stand there for like 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
people will tell my team will tell people, "Oh, don't worry, he's visioning, he's thinking, he's," because I love to take something from nothing and turn it into something. So whether your company's message is, world peace, whether your company's message is, fighting hunger, whether your customer's message is the number one brand in the world, whatever it may be, if you give me the task of turning that message into something that people can touch, feel, see, smell, taste, that gets my juices flowing. And that's why I love events. I really, really do.
I don't really need to say much on top of that, but so I'll wrap us up here. I have a kind of a closing question on
Okay.
my podcast that I'm always just so fascinated. It's kind of like human research for me. I told you I'm very much so into like EQ.
Yeah.
I think it's such a building block, both personally and professionally.
Mhm.
It's been a big part of my life, just kind of in growth. I feel like you got to be a constant learner, but this doesn't have to be event related. It can be, doesn't have to be. What is advice to your younger self?
Advice to my younger self would be give yourself grace. And this is something I've been sharing with anybody I talk to these days, just because the world is so nuts and there's so much going on. And we just came out of COVID, and like things have just not been easy these past few years. But I think we're just so hard on ourselves. Like I know I've been hard on myself throughout my entire life. Like I said, I knew what I was up against when I started my career, when I just got going. I knew. And so I think I was so hard on myself to a point where there were many moments where I know I probably could have just breathed and give myself grace. So even when I talk to my team and they're like, "Oh, I didn't get to this one thing today," like, give yourself grace. I just had someone on my team say to me, like, "Hey, Tavar, I need to take these 2 days off. And it's right before our merchant summit. Is that okay? If it's not okay, I don't have to go. It's okay." And I'm like, "No, plan so you can take the time off."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
The accountability piece in there
Right.
is
You
is
don't av
huge. I love
Yeah,
that.
you don't avoid taking time off so you can plan. You plan so you
Mhm.
can take time off. And so
Yeah.
and that's a perfect example where I say, give yourself some grace. And so that would be the advice I'd give to my younger self. Don't be too hard on yourself. Stay focused, yes. Have goals, yes. Have your North Star, yes. But in the process of growing and thriving, give yourself some grace.
I think that's a good description of it, right? Because I'm a big believer in that as well. I like that you said that. And grace is, it's not saying you have some excuse that you can just
Right.
roll into.
Right.
There's an accountability piece. Like your example of with your team member is great. It's basically
Yeah.
saying, it's not saying like, yeah, sure, go ahead and take it, do what you want, give yourself some grace. It's saying, no, set yourself up so you can go get those days.
Mhm.
You got to
Exactly.
have the accountability piece to your
Absolutely.
team, to your, whatever it may be, to then say, okay, make sure you give yourself some grace and take your time and
Absolutely.
get done what you need to get done. Nice.
Absolutely.
Tavar, thanks for being on the show. It was great to talk to you.
So much fun. I really enjoyed it, and I hope it speaks to someone.
I think it will speak to a lot of people. So I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. As always, anybody who's listening, anybody who's watching, greatly appreciate it. And that's another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much.